waiting for a member of the committee, but he's stuck in a tube outside Morden, so I think we'll introduce the preliminary part of the meeting, and then hopefully he might have arrived by then. So welcome to the Planning Applications Committee. Do we have apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dean and Councillor Crowe is
Thank you, Councillor Crowe. Welcome back to the committee. It's always good to have you here. Order of agenda, and we're going to take High Path first, which is agenda item 8. Well done. Then we're going to take Coincide West, because I think we've got a babysitting issue. And then item 620, the Broadway. And then the rest of the items, oh no, 5's down there, isn't it?
Yeah, 5's at the end, isn't it?
Yeah, we have, so then it will be number 9, Southey Bowls, 10, Parkside Gardens, 11, Streatham Road, and then Belvedere, Westside, and Lancaster will be, that will be the order of the agenda tonight. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Anyone? No? Okay. Can I just say that both Najib Latif, Councillor Latif and I both chair the Design and Review panel, but we do not speak at that panel. We are only chairing it, so we don't have any part of the discussion. And therefore we remain impartial, because those applications may come to the committee at some point, and we can't be in a position where we've expressed opinions. Yes.
Please note that this meeting is being sound recorded for subsequent broadcast on the Council's website and YouTube channel. Therefore, if you are participating in this meeting, you are consenting to being recorded and to the use of those sound recordings for broadcast. If you have any queries regarding this, please speak to me after the meeting. Please also note that some members of the public may be exercising their legal right to record both the vision and sound of the meeting. This is entirely independent of the Council, and the Council has no control over the use of this recorded material. If you have any questions, please speak to the people who are making these recordings. Thank you.
Just to explain how the committee works, as we have an agenda, the agenda item will be presented first of all by the officer, who will go through and explain the agenda in detail. And then we will invite objectors and then agents to make their position on the item. And they will have, the objector will have 3 minutes. And if there are 2 objectors, then the agent has an equal amount of time to respond to that. We've got a traffic light system here. So that 3 minutes, when it gets to 2 minutes, the amber light will go on, and then you have 1 minute left really to finish your submission. And it's really helpful if you, when the red light does come on, if you do stop speaking. Otherwise, I will have to ask you to, and I'd rather not. Okay. So our first item on the agenda tonight is the High Path Estate. And I hand that over to our officer to present for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening all. So this application is the reserve matters for Phase 2 High Path, the redevelopment following approval of outline plan application presented to PAC last year on the 8th of March. All matters are reserved to be determined, just scale, layout, access, landscaping and appearance. The Council, in its role as local planning authority, has also consulted residents, statutory and non-statutory consultees in determining and assessing this reserve matters application, as fully documented in the Officer's Committee report. The assessment for height, width and positioning of this Phase 2 reserve matters application included number of residential and non-residential floor area, amount of vehicle parking space, amount of play space, and overall principle of development was agreed in the outline plan application that has also been presented to PAC last year. The proposed development comprising of 2 parts, the redevelopment of the existing Marsh Court, which is a 10-storey building block situated on the corner of Piccourt Road and High Path, the redevelopment of properties on the western side of Abbey Road. The redevelopment of Marsh Court would deliver 4 building typologies comprising of the following. The mansion blocks, these will be situated on the northern side of High Path Phase 2 and will comprise of 9 stories with 2-storey setbacks from the building. This site is located along the central neighbourhood park facing Pincourt Road. This development will look at the neighbourhood park facing the neighbourhood park and takes its cue from the approved Phase 1 mansion blocks, which integrates well in design concept with the Phase 1 adjoining building. The second building typology is the landmark building, also known as the Gateway building, which will be located on the corner junction of Pincourt Road and High Path. This has been set back from the street at a minimum of 5 metres to allow better pedestrian cycle routes and improvements to the wider public realm that connects with the neighbourhood park. High Path blocks is the third building typology. This building would be situated on the lower block of High Path, comprising of 7 stories with a setback at 6-storey level. This part of the development would be stepped down to meet the scale of the Mews and fit well with adjacent Phase 1 building. And the last building typology on this setting is the Mews. This will be situated in the inner side of the blocks facing, if you can see on the western side, on the eastern side of that site, the Mews will be facing High Path Phase 1, which was formerly the site of the old lamp works. The landscape proposals for this setting provides a shared street surface with equal priority for all modes of transport and creating a friendly pedestrian and cycling environment. And the other part of the Phase 2 for High Path will be the redevelopment of the Lovell House, which is on the western side of Abbey Road. This will comprise of 8 dwellings over 3 floors. The proposed development will be of similar consistent building typologies that reflects the layout, scale and street scene of the existing properties on Abbey Road. The scheme will also provide non-residential floor space comprising of 187 square metres, and this will be in flexible use of A1, A2, A3, B1 and D1 at ground floor levels. Members should note that the overall amount of residential floor space for High Path Estate regeneration has already been accepted in the outline plan application presented to MAC on Plan Applications Committee on 8th of March last year, 2018. The principle of development has already been established through the granting of the outline plan application, which is for the erection of 15,070 residential dwellings and overall of 9,900 square metres of non-residential floor space, including associated neighbourhood park, community spaces, amenity spaces, children play spaces and so on, which has already been accepted and granted with Section 106 granted. Overall, it's considered that the proposed development presented to members this evening is in accordance with the aims and objectives of the Site Policies Plan, Core Planning Strategy, Estates Local Plan, London Plan and then NPPF, and would be suitable to the site and the surrounding area. Officers considered that there are no adverse impacts that would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of this scheme when assessed against policies and guidance. And members and Chair are respectively requested to grant permission for this reserved matters application for Phase 2 High Path Estate.
Thank you. I have Eve Cohen and Cyprian Edmonds wishing to speak. Cyprian Edmonds, please. Yeah. If you press the silver button, if you press the silver button, your microphone will come on.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Cyprian Edmonds and I chair the High Path Community Association, which represents the residents of the High Path Estate. My statement is an objection based on the appearance of the applicant's proposals for the said application. Members of the panel, as a resident of the High Path estate of over 20 years and a founding member of the UK's only straw bale builders association, I feel suitably qualified to comment on this application. The applicant's urban design report says the Park Mansion will use as primary facing material a multi-red wire cut brick combining lighter and darker shades of red, including grey inserts that will coordinate with the metal cladding proposed for the top set back floors as well as the window frames. What isn't clear in this is what type of material these bricks will be made of, and furthermore what the foundations comprise of or the fascia. Part of the considerations that need to be taken on board for this application is the race to reducing carbon emissions. Zero carbon, as it is now popularly known, is a topical hot potato, and the construction industry is as concerned about this as any other major manufacturing industry. In the London Plan Policy 5.2, minimising carbon dioxide emissions, a target of zero carbon between 2016 and 2031 is projected for buildings for domestic use. Around half of the CO2 emissions in the construction industry are from cement production, both in the manufacturing process and as a byproduct of the chemical reactions. By optimising the use of less polluting materials, the housing provider will be cutting embedded carbon in the new buildings on this estate. Sustainable materials such as timber, straw and compressed earth have lower carbon footprints than cement, as well as absorbing CO2 while growing. One of the reasons for the granting of permission in the outline planning application was that the cost of maintaining all of the homes that needed improvement outweighed the proposal to start anew. Honing in from the off, the right energy saving and sustainable materials would not only address the long-term need to reduce the offsets of carbon, but remove the expensive impact of maintaining poorly insulated homes. For example, there would be an eradication of mould or condensation. Such are the benefits of building with natural materials like straw panels. Precast hempcrete block is available to all builders who may not have the specialist knowledge required when hempcrete is wet cast and dried on site. Natural building materials are readily available in the UK, and wholesale manufacturers in Europe utilise this exponentially. What better way to rid that stain on their reputation by being bold, innovative and leading with alternative forms of construction to this scale?
Thank you. Eve Cohen. Is Eve there?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. During the public consultations held by Clarion for the detailed designs of Phase 2 of the High Path regeneration, a number of us were deeply concerned about the lack of toilet provision in 5-person properties, where the single toilet was contained within the single bathroom, putting it out of use whenever someone was having a bath or shower. As a result, and to our delight, in the next iteration, the architects incorporated an additional separate toilet in these properties. However, this has not improved the situation for 4-person or even 3-person properties where there is one toilet within the one bathroom. For example, anyone with gastroenteritis or winter vomiting virus will not be able to get to the toilet if the bathroom is in use, and likewise, no one else will be able to use the bathroom when the toilet is in use. How can parents teach their children good hygiene, such as washing their hands before eating, when the only facilities are in an occupied bathroom? The kitchen sink is not a replacement for those of us who've always been taught not to wash our hands where food is being prepared. These toilets should be separated from the bathrooms. I'm very concerned about the lack of bathroom and toilet facilities in the larger occupancy properties. The 5-, 6- and 7-person properties have a bathroom with a toilet and a separate toilet. This does not give much toilet provision for the 6- and 7-person properties, given that one toilet is out of action when the bathroom is in use. This toilet should be separated from the bathroom or an additional toilet provided. We all lead much busier lives now and there's greater time pressure. Having just one bathroom for 5, 6 or 7 people to wash, shower, bathe, clean their teeth, get out to work and school in the morning is inadequate. There should be a second shower room for these larger occupancy properties. At last week's full council meeting on the 18th of September, the Cabinet Member for Regeneration, Housing and Transport expressed the concern Merton Council has over unscrupulous landlords and homes of multiple occupancy. These high-path properties could easily become the slums of the future, with unscrupulous landlords renting out homes of multiple occupancy with inadequate sanitary provision. We are building homes for the 21st century. Please make it a condition that sanitary provision is improved in these properties. Thank you.
Paul Quinn, please.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Paul Quinn, and I manage the regeneration projects for Clarion Housing Group. For a number of years now, we've been working with local residents and the London Borough of Merton to bring forward plans to build over 700 new social rented homes, new community infrastructure and parks, green spaces, and a further 2,000 private homes at a time of acute housing need in the borough. Tonight, we ask you to determine plans for 113 new homes for High Path. These plans are the product of an extensive programme of community engagement, a design review panel, and pre-application discussions with your planning officers. The end result are designs that have been very well received and are already starting to influence the shape of further plans for High Path. Of the homes themselves, this application allows for 113 new homes in total, of which 82% are social or affordable rented. The remainder are replacement homes for resident homeowners in High Path. None are for sale. All the homes are tenure blind, including all the entrances. They meet or exceed London space standards, both internally and externally. Every home will have underfloor heating, preparing the ground for an exceptionally efficient low-carbon heat network and energy centre to be built in Phase 3. The outline planning Section 106 commits us to delivering zero-carbon new homes, and High Path is the test bed for Clarion's circular economy strategy. Dual-aspect homes have been maximised. One-bedroom apartments make up the great majority of the single-aspect homes, where wide frontages and full floor-to-ceiling 2.4-metre windows and balconies ensure good light and ventilation. None are north-facing. In terms of landscape, the communal courtyard is over 200 metres square and includes informal play space and equipment for younger children. The houses on Abbey Road have their own large gardens. 5 Category C trees will be removed and replaced with 27 semi-mature trees specifically chosen for this location. And this phase introduces an underground refuse system, the first in the borough, keeping the streets clean and tidy. And this will be extended right across High Path and later Eastfields. This is a challenging site, occupying a prominent location in High Path. We've developed a construction management plan with the outline planning application to ensure residents are disturbed as little as possible during the process of constructing their new homes. This will be further developed and submitted for officers' approval under the conditions of the outline permission. This application is confirmation of Clarion's commitment to deliver fully its residents' offer. We are rehousing existing residents first. This Phase 2 site, together with the new homes already underway in High Path, will rehouse over 60% of all the residents who have chosen to stay, and we will deliver nearly half of all the affordable housing approved in the master plan. Residents are moving into homes at least as large, and in most cases larger, than the homes they are leaving. Everyone has their own private outdoor space. Currently, fewer than 1 in 3 in High Path have this. All resident leaseholders and freeholders will be offered a new home exactly as promised in the residence offer, and no family goes back into overcrowded accommodation. Finally, this all means the existing community is kept intact and in situ, and at the same time we can set about rebuilding some of Merton's poorest social housing, building new homes that will house generations of families for years to come. Thank you.
Yes. So the first point with regards to the materials, this reserve matters application has assessed obviously the appearance for the reserve matters. The materials, the application was previously presented to DRP, and since then we've got a scheme where it was considered to be acceptable for the materials proposed. But if it's to mention about the the quality of the bricks. There's a condition in the reserve matters. If you turn to, if I could draw members' attention to page 89, we've added. It's unusual to add conditions in reserve matters because we should be looking at the outline plan application. But in some cases where officers feel that there needs to be a significant degree of control, we can add conditions. And in this case, we've added 2 conditions in there for both sample materials, and that's relating to all elevations, balcony treatments, fascias, everything that you mentioned. So that gives the officers degree of control to have that assessed, looked at, and then discharged accordingly. So we have physical materials sent to us. And then the second condition that relates to materials is the surfacing. So that relates to the ground conditions, the materials for surfacing, hard surfacing, relating to how permeable it is, how good it looks in the area. So all that will be also sent through to local plan officers to assess and then discharge that accordingly. So that addresses the issues relating to materials. The second part relating to zero carbon emissions, this is a very, very important aspect, especially with the council declaring emergency, climate change emergency. And with this regard, I would like to point the members' attention to section 106, which has been added to the outline plan application and granted. And this relates to the carbon offsetting that we require applicants. And the applicants are required to provide an energy strategy prior to the commencement of the relevant development. And this is to be agreed in writing by the local authority and specialist technical officers. So that addresses the zero carbon issue. And so yeah, the prior to commencement is a trigger, and that has to be agreed at that point, which gives us a degree of control to ensure that they have met the latest legislation. Thank you.
This has not been addressed.
With regards to the issues of toilets, again, the scheme was presented to officers, and the way it's presented, officers have an opportunity to look at the Mayor's Housing Design Guide policies. When it comes to toilets, provision of two bathrooms for a 2-bedroom flat isn't in line with policy. What it is you've got to assess the application in line with policy and guidance. And the scheme has been assessed in line with policy and guidance, and it meets the GLA Mayor's Housing Design Guide on those terms.
I open it to members' questions. Councillor Lanning.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions, if I may. The first, which I think may have already been addressed by the last speaker, is that out of the 113 homes, what percentage meet the space standards and the amenity standards of the London plan? And the second is on page 69, it outlined that 85% of Block 2A, 79% of Block 2B, and 80% of Abbey Road houses meet the minimum average daylight factor. So sort of a 2-part question on this. Is there anything from sort of a design perspective that could be done to address that? And secondly, out of those that don't meet the minimum requirements, how many of those are single aspect? Thank you.
So both very good questions. So with regards to the first question, the 113 units, so it's everything. The scheme has been tested by officers to accord with the Mayor's Housing Design Guide, specifically relating to which you mentioned. Sorry.
I was just asking the percentage of the 113 homes that meet the space standards and the amenity standards.
The officers have assessed that, and it all meets the minimum space standards as described in the National Housing Standards. What was presented to, what was submitted with the outline reserve matters application was a daylight and sunlight assessment. With schemes like this, every scheme has to meet the the BRE guidelines, the British Research Establishment, all the schemes, all the units were in accordance with that, and there would be daylight and sunlight throughout the day. Where you mentioned the percentages, all the units would take acceptable levels of daylight throughout the day. With regards to the single aspect units, there are 31 units that are single aspect, and these are located on the mansion blocks. But one of the tests of the Mayor's Housing Design Guide is to ensure that, first of all, they have active frontages, they have adequate levels of windows and doors that have high width. The height of the windows is to floor to ceiling, and the width of the windows take up the whole space. Secondly, it's important to consider the depth of these properties. They shouldn't be too shallow. So the test that the officers would have to undertake. And then the other part is they mustn't be, ideally they should be within 1 and 2 bedrooms with active frontages above retail units. So the officers assessed all these elements, and the design of the design of what's being proposed is in acceptance with the Mayor's Housing Design Guide.
If I could just come back really quickly, just on the daylight sunlight point. On page 69, I suppose there's a suggestion that between 10 to 20% of the properties that are outlined there don't meet the minimum ADF. I just wondered whether you could explain what that would mean for someone living there.
So, in terms of the daylight and sunlight, all the habitable rooms would receive 100% daylight and sunlight throughout the day. So some of the units, some of the ones that are shortage are, for instance, the servicing areas, the hallways, and sort of parts of the room that we don't use as habitable accommodation.
This is probably... is there scope on site to increase the number of electric vehicle charging points? Because in the future, that's where we're going. And we need to make sure there's a site there. I didn't notice anything about solar panels in the brief. Have I missed it? And the third one is, and you might not be able to explain this, can you explain how an underground waste collection system works? Thank you.
Again, I would like to draw members' attention to the fact that we're here today to assess the reserve matters. But for your questions, I will point you to the relevant section of the Section 106, which deals with.
You'll find that quite a few of this committee weren't actually on the committee when it was first discussed. So
absolutely, I'm happy to answer your question. The electrical charging vehicles. If you look at the Section 106, we have appropriate provisions within the Section 106 to ensure that the electrical charging vehicles are provided and they are policy compliant. With regards to solar panels, we do have again a condition to deal with the energy strategy, and that the applicants will be required to submit an energy strategy showing how they've demonstrated the use of solar panels. With regards to the waste, if I can draw members' attention to the plans that's provided, you'll see that within the blocks there are 2 sections on the east and west side of the blocks, there are 2 sections for refuge recycling. Underground refuge systems are proposed for High Path, but they will be accordingly discharged with the relevant obligation inserted in the Section 106. So when they do kick in, we will assess in terms of the infrastructure, the maintenance and management, and that will all be discharged accordingly with technical experts, waste refuge consultant officers. So we've got provisions within the Section 106 to address both the solar panels and the waste strategy for underground refuge system going forward. And the solar panels will be dealt with by way of condition attached to the outline permission.
Councillor Latif.
Thank you, Chair. I think they've answered most of the questions of the single aspect. I remember that the location of the affordable units are all pepper-potted within the private residential. What criteria will you use to determine the location of the affordable units?
So going back to the section 106, which has become a manuscript for a while, it's the section we inserted in the section 106 affordable housing schedule mix, and the applicants would need to provide evidence to show where the affordable housing is to be provided on site, and they've done that and demonstrated it. And for this phase, I can clarify that the majority of the larger units will be for affordable housing, and that includes the two-bed masonettes, three-bed flats, the three-bed duplexes, four-bed flats, and four-bed masonettes. They're all for affordable housing, and they all have dual aspect with private amenity spaces. So all that information is in the pack and also on the website. And thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Councillor.
Can we just go back to the toilets, please? I am a bit concerned, particularly about the four-bedroom flats with one loo in the bathroom, which does seem to me to be challenging from the point of view of kind of family life. Is that, sorry? Four person, you're right, my apologies. But even four persons, is this absolutely something that this committee can decide it wants to have a view on? Or are you saying that because it's within policy, we actually don't have any say over that? Thank you.
To what's in the GLA housing design guide, it's what officers will assess is whether the proposal so if it's, for instance, 2-bedroom, 3-person, 3-bedroom, 4 persons, it's based on the minimum space standard that's been provided for that, the minimum space, and how many residents will be within that space. And so, if the scheme, if the proposal is in accordance with that, officers have to approve the application based on what the Mayor's Housing SPG states. And so everything has been tested in regards to policy, London Plan, the GLA Housing Design Guide, and it has passed.
It is policy compliant, but it's something we could talk about afterwards.
Talk to the applicant about it potentially.
We could talk to the applicant about it. We have to address the plan we have before us. Then we go on to
Yes, this is para 8.637. It talks about the height of the fences for the Abbey Road houses, and says perhaps residents would feel competent to reduce the height or open up the fences to increase sunlight. Can we not start with it that way? Page 70, 8.6.37. And it's talking about the height of fences between the gardens, and I wonder whether we couldn't, frankly, start with them lower, because they're not going to be huge gardens, are they?
Again, I do go back to the daylight and sunlight assessment. So the gardens, including the internal spaces, has been assessed and tested against the BRE daylight and sunlight assessment, and they are compliant. So on those bases, officers have to accept what's presented.
Can we move to Councillor Christie?
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, two questions. Firstly, on the layout, can I ask about the trees? If 5 trees are being removed, which ones are they, or where are they in relation to the 7 existing ones? And of the 29 being planted, as far as I can see, there's only 11 on the plan. So could you just describe where the others would be? And secondly, just on the construction stages, by the end of phase 2, how many 2-bed or 5-person properties will have been constructed? Thanks. 2 bed, 5 person. Yeah.
So yeah, with regards to the trees firstly, so throughout the site, I'm not too sure if we can, unfortunately there's no plan showing the trees. I just want to stress very quickly as well is that we do have a condition for arboricultural method statement which will be adequately discharged with the aid of the specialist officer. The trees to be removed will be along Abbey Road and also along Pincott Road to the west of what we're looking at here, and some on High Path. So there'll be a variety of trees, and these trees are not suitable and of lower category, but what's to be replaced is more ideal and more suitable for that environment. Again, the officers have a degree of control to consult the specialist tree officer, which we have a condition attached to the outline plan application to ensure that they do meet the main requirements. And with regards to the 2-bed units, obviously, if the application presented today is approved, there are still some conditions that need to be discharged, and they are pre-commencement conditions. So I think the development phase for phase 2 is expected to be, I think, 2021, if I'm correct. But before that, there needs to be a series of conditions, detailed conditions that the officers have to discharge. And again, like the arboricultural method statement, the most important one is the demolition construction management plan, and that looks at the air quality, dust mitigation, noise, and so on, to ensure that there is no harm to existing and nearby residents.
Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to clarify this bathroom and toilet issue. In a 3-bedroom unit, which accommodates 6 people, am I right in saying there will just be the one bathroom, and in that one bathroom will be the toilet for the use of the 6 people?
So again, going back to the national standards and how this design has unfolded, the scheme is compliant in terms of the standards that's been set in both the Mayor's Housing Design Guide. So yeah, it's compliant.
People.
I think actually for the 3-bedroom, 6-person, it's got a toilet. It's got a bathroom with a toilet and a separate WC.
So if you're talking about the bathroom, there is one bathroom and there is a downstairs toilet, just as a WC.
Councillor Teef.
Very, very quick question. Of the 17 car parking spaces that you're providing, which are the 13 as standard, how are you allocating those car parking spaces?
Yeah. Firstly, the allocation will be on a like-for-like basis, and any uplift will be shared. But they are so there'll be one. The 8 houses will have their designated parking spaces, and the other parking for the flattered development will be just on-street parking. But what's important to consider here is the scheme has gone above and beyond in terms of providing wheelchair accessible and also wheelchair adaptable units, and there will be 13 of the wheelchair adaptable units will be accessible for parking. There'll be 13 wheelchair adaptable parking spaces, as well as 2 wheelchair parking spaces. So that's how they're allocated. But the 8 houses essentially will have their own parking space, and then the flatted development it'll be just free for all parking on street. Sorry. Yeah.
Any more questions? Move to comments then, please. Do you have any comments? Councillor Crowe.
Firstly, in relation to the light reference on page 69, it seems to me that if 20% of the dwellings don't meet the minimum requirement, that's a material consideration in the adverse, because 20%'s got to be a material issue, I would have thought. then just on this business about the bathrooms and toilets, I'm still not convinced that we are providing enough bathrooms and toilets. So I'm not sure it meets DMD2 as good design. So for those two reasons, I'm mindful to reject this application.
Are there any other comments, please? Nope. Yes, Councillor Lanning.
If I could just come back to those comments, I think the point that was made around the meeting the minimum ADF was that they weren't habitable rooms that were impacted around the sunlight or daylight, so they could be corridors or something like that. And I mean, if we talk from sort of personal experience, there'll be rooms where we don't have windows. And then on the point around toilets and bathrooms, I think a 3-bedroom, 6-person is in terms of the maximum that you would expect in a dwelling, but you wouldn't necessarily have 6 people in a 3-bedroom property. So I think that the existing sort of toilet provision sounds adequate, and it also is policy compliant. So I'd definitely be minded to approve.
Are there any other comments, please? Councillor McGrath.
I mean, I think there's a huge amount to like about this, and I'm not going to vote against it, but I am concerned about, the gentleman from Clarion, I think, rightly said, hopefully there'll be many years of, people living in these very happily. But I also think with 4 people and 1 loo in the bathroom, there's going to be generations of people knocking on the door saying, will you hurry up? So I think it's a pity they couldn't have dealt with that, but I'm still going to vote for it.
Anyone else wish to comment? Councillor Ward.
Thank you. I live in a small flat where the landing area has no windows and no artificial light. It's just the area you walk through. Has no direct sunlight. It's just the area you walk through to get to all the other rooms. So, 20% of the rooms in the house I live in don't have any sunlight. It's the corridor to get to all the other rooms which do have windows. 20% is acceptable. Again, I live in a flat with a bedroom and a small box room, so a 3-person flat. Maybe if there's a slightly bigger box room, a 4-person flat. We have 1 toilet in the bathroom. I grew up in a 3-bedroom semi with 6 of us in that house, and we had 1 toilet in the bedroom until we extended as we had a growing family. 1 toilet in the bathroom for a 2-bedroom flat or even a 2-bedroom and a box room house is perfectly normal, meets the standards. And to be honest, yes, I grew up in a family of 6 people with 3 sisters and occasionally had to wait to go to the toilet. It's not a planning consideration to say you've got to make developers provide extra toilets for those occasional situations. It meets the guidelines. We can't force developers to go and put extra toilets in every single 2-bedroom flat in the development because it wouldn't be financially viable for them to build it anymore, or the rents would be higher. So let's actually be sensible about this and not nitpick on exactly how many toilets. It's a perfectly great development. There will be great new housing for the people in this area next to the ward that I represent, and we should absolutely pass it tonight with no extra conditions or anything else on toilets or anything else.
Okay. Unless you want to move that recommendation. Are you okay with this? No, okay. Then I'm going to move to the vote. Okay? Can I see those in favour, please, show? And those against? I think that's it, isn't it? There's nobody not voting. And then, therefore, the recommendations are carried. Now going to move to item 7, which is 18 Common Side West.
Chair, if I can just begin by referring members to some of the late letters, or sorry, emails in this instance, that have been circulated. I'm just keen to confirm that members have seen the late email circulated by the Mitcham Cricket Green and Heritage Group. The proposals are to construct an additional 2-bedroom flat on top of a recently constructed block of 4 flats following an approval in 2014. And if you see where the hand is moving on the screen, you'll see that's the area where the proposed extra flat is to go. The new flat would add a further 2.9 metres to the height of the building. The flat would be almost 77 square metres in terms of its gross floor area. It would have 2 small roof terraces of 8.3 square metres in total. The extension would be set back from the front and rear elevations, and again, if you can see where the hand is moving across the screen here and then over towards the left side, you see where the hand's moving up and down on the image there. You'll see that the extension is set well in from the perimeter of the existing building. The extension would be clad. Now I've written down it'd be clad in timber and painted grey to match the coloured elements of the lower level facing materials. The materials, when you first look at them, give you the impression that it's a metal finish. But having visited the site, there is what appears to be a grey, perhaps prefabricated wood effect timber cladding painted in grey on the lower levels of the building at present. And I believe that's the intention of the applicant, having read the annotation to the drawings, that's what's proposed for parts of the upper floor. The proposals would also incorporate here a curved rendered element which would line up with another curved element on the floor below, and that would enclose the extension to the stairwell. A number of objections have been received covering various large-scale and small-scale design issues ranging from being visually overbearing, resulting in overlooking, to the choice of facing materials being inappropriate in the writer's view. This modest proposal has not been presented to the design review panel, but has been reviewed by the council's by the planning section's design officer and also the conservation officer, neither of who have raised objections. The officer's report sets out the rationale for engaging with the designer in assessing the latest proposals and identifies observations made at the time of considering the initial proposals to redevelop the site in 2013. And if I can refer members to paragraph 7.8 of the officer's report, you'll see that when proposals were considered back in 2012 for the scheme which would have what at the time was proposing to result in the demolition of the bungalow on the site, the members of the design review panel did express views that the stairwell was the obvious element to the form to express vertically. It could be extended beyond the roof height. This is something that they've done. And again, in the comments from the design review panel, the building would benefit from an additional storey, albeit set back from the main building line. Again, this is what the applicant has done. The officer's report provides an extensive assessment of the proposal's potential impact on existing flats, neighbouring flats and nearby houses in Langdale Avenue. Light, outlook and privacy would, in the officer's judgment, not be harmed by the proposals. The unit would comfortably meet the National Housing Floor Space Standards and London Plan and local plan standards for outdoor amenity space. Notwithstanding that the proposals do not propose an additional parking space, the Transport Officer has not raised an objection, given the fair peat-out score of the site. With some limited capacity in neighbouring streets where parking controls are not present, and in the knowledge that only around 70% of all Merton's households have access to a car, it would appear unreasonable to withhold permission on the basis of the provision of 4 spaces for 5 units. Various concerns regarding managing construction traffic and arrangements for the storage of materials can be addressed by condition, and permission is recommended subject to conditions.
Thank you. Joanna Willman.
Thank you. So my name's Jo Willman and I'm a resident of 18 Commonside West. Firstly, I'm concerned that whilst the construction works are taking place for the proposed scheme, the residents, including my 2-year-old son, will be living in unsafe living conditions. We will effectively be living in a building site. I've set out in detail in my representations why such safety concerns are unique to this proposed scheme, and I urge the members to review these and use whatever discretion they have to take this into account in their decision. Reserving such fundamental concerns about safety to a construction method statement without first considering if they could even be overcome would, in my view, be quite reckless. Secondly, I'm concerned about how the planning officer reached their decision to recommend granting planning permission to this scheme. Planning permission was granted in 2014 for the demolition of the pre-existing bungalow and construction of the current 2-storey building on the site of 18 Commonside West. The question of the height of the building was determined when the planning was originally granted. Specifically, in the planning officer's delegated report, they said that the height of the building was reduced following advice from planning officers and the design review panel. It's unclear why in the current delegated report to this committee, why it refers to comments from an earlier design review panel in 2012, as they were evidently not taken into account in the council's final determination to grant planning permission for a 2-storey building. Therefore, the only relevant question for the members in respect of this current proposal is what material changes have occurred between the council's 2014 decision and now, which would justify the council reaching a completely different conclusion on the height of the building. Specifically, why, in terms of the outlook for neighbours, the impact of a 3rd storey, and this is a quote from a planning officer, is no longer considered to be visually intrusive and overly dominant. The report to this committee notes that the new 3-storey building at number 22, which is next door, is an example of how the street scene has evolved. However, the report does not provide any reasons why this makes a 3-storey building on the site of 18 Commonside West appropriate now when it previously wasn't in 2014. The mere existence of a 3-storey building at number 22 is not a reason in itself to justify raising the height of 18 Commonside West. And it's worth noting that number 22, even in its pre-existing form, was quite considerably higher than 18 Commonside West. Any decision of the council which does not give reasons why it has changed its mind would be unjustified, unreasonable and open to legal challenge. The fundamental problem with this application is that the developer is trying to retrospectively cram too much onto this site. The bulk and massing of the proposed building would detract from the varied character of the properties along Commonside West. It would also be intrusive and overly dominant on neighbouring properties to the rear of the site on Langdale Avenue. The proposed scheme should therefore be rejected on bulk and massing and impact on neighbouring amenity. Thank you.
Can I call on Jason C? Is he here?
No, C is the applicant. It's Mr. Pogorello instead. Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, right. I'm on the wrong sheet. Yes, Mr. Pogorello. Is that how you say the name? Pogorello?
Mike Pogorello. Hi, thank you, Chair. I'm the applicant. This original application was submitted in January of this year, and following the statutory declaration period, or consultation period rather, 7 objections were raised, and I've spent most of the summer liaising with the planning officer, the conservation officer and the urban design officer to come forward with a scheme which would be more acceptable, and I believe that's what we've done. The 2 major amendments that have been made were, one is materiality, where we've used materials which are going to blend in with the first floor level, and we've also decreased the footprint of the building to set it back at the front and the rear to make it less obtrusive, which I believe a lot of people were not happy with. We're a family business and we want to make it as as acceptable to the people that are living there and to the street scene as possible. So that's why we were happy to make these amendments. With regard to working on site while we're there, we're extremely conscious that we want to be as neighbourly and friendly with the people that are living there and less obtrusive if we possibly can, and make the whole thing very efficient and quick, should permission be granted. Going back to the design and review panel, the original scheme was scrutinised by them twice in 2012. It was quite an amazing experience, but they did actually say that they felt that the original building that we had proposed was too wide and too flat, and they wondered why another storey hadn't been put on top. At the time, it wasn't put on top because of height levels. Since then, the number 22 has been built, that you can see there on the left. And now we believe that this new addition on top of 18 actually complements the street scene. It will provide another useful unit. Yes, it is a commercial venture, I agree, but a number of people have said to us while we were building and since it's been built, they can't understand why there isn't another floor on top. We believe that when it's been done, and it will be done properly, that anyone that doesn't know the planning history of the building, when driving past, will naturally assume the whole thing was built at one go, and it won't be just another box extension stuck on the top that sticks out like a sore thumb. Thank you for your time.
Anything to report back?
Just to reassure the objector, and officers fully acknowledge that a proposal like this, if you're living in a building, could be a potential source of nuisance. However, there are two types of planning conditions which can be attached to a decision. Those that are required to be signed off before the development commences, and those that can be signed off towards the end of a scheme, or, for example, before occupation. So where it's a landscaping scheme, you might expect that to be signed off towards the end of a development proposal. Where it's something like a construction management plan, where the various issues regarding storage of materials, operatives coming to the site, measures for dust suppression, they're all construction matters which I think in this instance, given the fact that the proposal is on top of an existing occupied building, would reasonably be something which officers would wish to ensure is bottomed out before the development actually commences. I think I would agree with the objector that it would be reckless to think otherwise on this. In terms of the passage of the schemes on the site in front of the design review panel, the case officer has provided me with some notes which do indicate that various iterations of schemes were brought before the design review panel on more than one occasion, and the first proposal, which actually had a sawtooth design to it in terms of the roof arrangement, actually got a red verdict from the panel. And I think in fairness to the planning officer, both the planning officer that dealt with the earlier scheme and the one which is dealing with the current scheme, subtle changes to the configuration of the additional floor on the footprint of the building, I would suggest can have a significant impact on how a scheme like this is viewed in terms of its impact on the surrounding area. Where the hand is moving across the screen, if you can imagine there a very modest setback to a building at second floor level, that's going to have a far greater impact than the solution which has been brought forward, which is pushing the building back to here in terms of the roof scape. I acknowledge that this is exercising a degree of judgment on the visual impact, but I think it would be rather harsh to say that in principle no additional accommodation on the roof of this building would be inappropriate. would be appropriate. And it's more realistic to say, has the design approach in this instance met the concerns that have been raised? And the officers consider that a suitable solution has been achieved in this instance.
Questions? Councillor Latif.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Looking at the location of this flat, it's directly above the flats on the first floor. So the services for this new flat, for example, the bathrooms directly above the bedrooms, will they be using the existing services to tie into, or are they going outside of the flat? And if they are using the existing services, will they require access to the flats below to connect to the main services?
Sorry, Chair, to bring that to a close, but that's a matter for the applicant to sort out via the building regulations. It's not for planners to start querying how services are going to be connected. I mean, that's the building regulations. That's what building surveyors are here for.
The reason why I ask is because of what the particular objector said, that the construction management plan will have an effect on their daily lives. So if they're trying to connect to existing services, they'll require access to the flats below. So I think that should be...
And as we've said, the construction management plan is something that would need to be signed off before development commences, so as to safeguard the quality of environment. So we would be looking to safeguard the quality of environment while not offering a view on a constructional issue. So if the constructional issue arises, then I would suggest that it's within, the remit of the planning officers to put certain measures in place in discussion with our colleagues, getting advice, to make sure that we make sensible and informed decisions. But we've got to make sure that there's that distinction between the building regulations and the planning conditions. Please be assured, we will want to do our very best to make sure that the amenities of the existing residents are safeguarded so far as is reasonably practicable.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to find out, zinc cladding finish, what's the lifespan for that and how safe is that to use?
In terms of lifespan of materials, again, that's going beyond what's reasonable for planners to ask in terms of materials. In terms of safety and fire safety in particular, that's something that would be covered again under the building regulations. Neil Milligan, the section manager, has attended various meetings of senior building control officers across London following the Grenfell fire. So, that is something that would be covered under the building regulations.
Any other questions? Councillor Southgate.
Thank you, Chair. Just trying to sort out the chronology of the views of the DRP at various stages. So in 2012, which told in paragraph 7.8 that they felt the building would benefit from an additional storey. And yet in 2014, later, the advice was that height should be reduced. So, this is quite important. Is it perceived that really it should be a two-storey building or a three-storey building?
Chair, as I'd indicated in respect of answering the points that were raised by the objector, I think it's very much a matter of judgment as to whether or not you feel that by setting a building back sufficiently from the front of the building. You see, if you look at an image like this, the impression you get is of a full height building, and the observer is in fact sort of probably floating about 2.5 to 3 meters above ground level to get that that view. You know, what we're looking at here is just simply an architectural elevation. We're not looking at a perspective. If we move on to the computer images, I think that then begins to give a far different impression of a building. And I wouldn't want to use the word impression as some sort of lightweight, inconsequential means of assessment. But if the impression that you get by setting a building sufficiently far back is such that you can see here where the brown timber is at the moment. If you look at that and then think of that as being probably half the front of the building, then as you're stood over towards, I suppose it's roughly where the pedestrian crossing is, where you come off the green. If you're looking across to the building, what you're looking at here is a building where half of it is ground and first floor, and then half of it over here is ground, first and second floor. So what's the impression? Is the impression of a full three-floored building, ground, first and second, or is it a fraction of that floor? So I think this is where that degree of judgment has to be exercised. I think I can't think for one moment that the design review panel would be so strident in saying on no account can you have an additional floor here. It's got to fit comfortably on the footprint of the building, but as the officers have negotiated, set sufficiently far back from the front edge of the building so as to diminish its impact. And at the moment, I think they've actually come up with quite a nice combination, because what they've done is they've actually picked out this key feature of the stairwell and really made something of that. As I said, we have to exercise judgment, and our judgment is they've come up with quite a good solution here.
Are there any more questions? Then can we have comments? No? Okay, can we move to the vote then? Can I see those in favour? Please show. I think I will. It's unanimous. And the application... Move to agenda item 6, which is 120 the Broadway.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the application site is located on the north side of the Broadway within Wimbledon Town Centre. The site comprises a 6-storey mid-terrace commercial building which is in use as office on upper floors and retail on ground floor. Off-street parking is located at the rear of the building and in the basement. The site's surroundings comprise residential flats to the east, north and west on upper floors and commercial premises on ground floors which front the Broadway. The proposal itself is to extend the existing 5th floor of the building to provide an additional 305 square metres of office space to the existing building. Other alterations also include provision of open plant on the roof, staining the existing bricks a dark grey colour, installation of new cladding at ground floor across the whole frontage, and provision of shower and wash facilities in the basement and extension of existing stairwell. So talking you through the plan, this is the existing elevations of the building, which I have here. Take you to the front, so that's the front of the building here at the moment. At the moment, this section here is stepped back, and then this section stepped back further. So it is the top floor proposed to be extended. So looking at the proposal, so this is a proposed basement plan. Proposal includes provision of additional shower facilities and storage facilities for the occupants of the office building. Proposed ground floor. The entrance at the front of the building, you'll see in some of the images I have, is to be enhanced. So the entrance to the office building is here. The actual retail unit at the ground floor is not to be altered internally. It's purely external changes in its design. Proposed first floor And the second floor, largely unchanged. A few internal facilities enhanced, such as toilet facilities. Third floor, fourth floor. The fourth floor has existing terraces already. These are proposed to be retained. Turning to the fifth floor plan, so the area hash is the area of the extension to the building. So the building at that fifth floor extends at the back, to the side and to the front. Top of the building, the roof plan of the building. So the additional plant would be here and here to the building, and also a roof terrace proposed with it. Turning to the elevations, this is at the rear of the site. So this extension here coming further back, new glazing put in with steel fins. Looking at the side, this extension here. Turning to the front, so extension coming up here. This terrace stays as the same, so there's this terrace. And then the stairwell extension at the back, which is just beyond here, you can see here. So there's a stairwell extension and the office extension here. Some section drawings submitted to show. I do have photographs obviously at the front of the building similar to this, but that's the CGI image proposed with the application, helping you put into context how the building would look. So that's the extension up here, terrace remaining, the bricks being stained dark grey colour, windows at the front remaining as is. The Sainsbury's building, so above it, they include a reclad here to help smarten up the appearance of the building, and there's the enhanced office entrance here. To site pictures, so that's a picture really trying to take it from similar to that CGI view to help. Extensions up here, that setback remains, and the plant up there. Looking at the rear, so view from the road at the rear, so it's that top floor you can see would push out, just set back from the one below. So it would be the floor, you can't particularly see it, but that will come up here. You have existing residential flats to the left-hand side, looking at the rear, and houses at the rear. And that's showing existing access down to the basement car park here. So members, I draw your attention now to the modification sheet. We received an additional objection and amendment to condition 3 following the call over of Chair and Vice Chair. Overall, members, proposal is considered to provide enhancement to the existing building in terms of office provision and appearance within the town centre. The scale and form of proposed extensions are considered to be sympathetic to the surroundings and are considered suitable design. Other benefits of the proposal include the enhancement of the ground floor retail frontage with new replacement cladding. Officers therefore recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
Sarah Sharp.
Chair, please refuse this application based on CS14, DMD2, DMD3 and DMD4, the London Plan and Design and Architect and the revised NPPF. I don't believe that it creates a positive and distinctive building. If anything, it creates a distinctively looming dark grey, rather depressing gash on the street scene, what is otherwise a charming, colourful and buzzing part of the Broadway, dominated by red terracotta brick Victorian buildings and the Grade 2 listed Wimbledon Theatre. With the proposed changes, it becomes dominating and imposing. The removal of stepping up from the older buildings, the height, depth and bulking of the building with extensive glazing and metal fins will create a dark vertical wall seen deep into the heart of the conservation area and obviously from right across the road where the Grade 2 Wimbledon Theatre stands. This will cause material harm and visual intrusion. The officers say the nature of the extensions being within the existing footprint won't cause material harm because the listed theatre is sufficiently separated from the subject site. But this isn't not the required 21 metres for a residential development, and the whole street needs to be taken into account. There was a reason why in 2007 the applicant gave deference to the older buildings by creating a stepping up design to maintain the rhythm, siting scale and massing. Now this is being taken away. The need for a 1.8 metre screen to mitigate the effect of the extensions and the substantial roof terraces indicates the extent of intrusiveness and dominance on the neighbouring amenities, affecting the privacy of residents in the sister chorus building next door, South Park Road and Stanley Road. Residents are already complaining of noise from the existing roof terrace. The proposals on paper may seem reasonable and acceptable in terms of height, extensions and materials, but I have sent you photos of how visible the existing building's upper levels are right now on the ground, seen deep into the conservation area and all the way down to the Kingston Road. These extensions may seem minor, but merging the upper floors, in my opinion, are disproportionate and unsympathetic to the form of the existing building and surrounding streetscape. Don't get me wrong, I welcome the applicant's desire to improve the building internally and externally, but not like this. The ratio of glass to brick continues to be disproportionate. Portland stand, characteristic of the town, is being replaced with a grey metal banner. The metal fins and painted dark grey bricks will replace the warm terracotta just across from a listed building. The rear of the building is retained in red brick, but the front is dark grey. Is this coherent? Please retain the red terracotta. The building isn't the highest quality as required by the London Plan, the CS14 and DMD2, and it was approved in 2007, well before Merton's 2011 core planning strategies, which cover us all today, here were adopted. But at least it fits in scale and brickwork colour-wise with the rest of the neighbourhood. The stepping up is more gentle and kinder to the older buildings, justifying the presence of poor examples like the metal-clad Premier Inn and YMCA is deplorable. Sorry. The building with its dark grey facade and side, bulky extensions and height will cause harm not only to the listed theatre but to the whole area. There is not one grey building along the Broadway, and for very good reason. Let's remember Merton's CS14, DMD2, the London Plan and NPPF state that planning authorities should always seek to secure high quality design to ensure that high quality inclusive designs and world-class architecture are promoted.
Sarah, I have to bring to a close.
Thank you.
Thank you. Having done that, I've got to find my piece of paper. Mike Spurgeon, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep it brief. Mostly just to say we've been working with officers throughout this process to try and develop a design which we feel is mutually beneficial and delivers designs which meet their aspirations as well as those of the applicant. We've looked to try and provide a relatively modest extension of the upper floors in a way which provides a high quality revision through the refurbishment of the existing office space in what we feel is a very sustainable location. Perhaps given the nature of the issues, I could refer to the architect, main scheme architect David King-Smith to my left, who might be able to respond on a couple of those matters.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I mean, I'm David King-Smith, 5+ Architects. We're in our IBA award-winning practice, and we've been commissioned by M&G to look at this building. M&G acquired the building, I think, within the last 18 months with a view to a long-term investment to improve the quality of what is a really quite tired and middling building, which is also partially vacant on 3 floors. And we've really focused on improving the workplace offer in terms of amenity for occupants of the building. The extension itself is modest relative to the scale of the building. I think it's about 6% of the overall floor area, but it enables the multi-million-pound investment that the fund is making in this building, and it's all part of the provision of the amenity space to the new roof terrace and other factors that go with trying to reposition this building in the workplace in an attractive way. For future workplace trends and current workplace trends as well. In terms of the materiality, we've made a decision that the Broadway is extremely diverse in terms of its materiality, and the larger commercial buildings in that setting, of which we're part of that eastern cluster, do demonstrate different materials. The terracotta referred to generally relates to the lower scale, more traditional buildings that are also evident in the context, but it is diverse like many parts of London. So it's a very genuine proposal to say it's a very large-scale investment in the whole building and is very much about a sort of holistic approach as opposed to just an extension to an office building. Thank you.
Do you want to comment on it?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in relation to some of those comments. In terms of the extension itself, so at the moment this is set back but even with the extension, there would still remain a setback to the boundary. With the proposal, the windows at the front would remain, and the use of dark stone in the brickwork. Obviously, the existing bricks are red, but they are obviously engineered brick. There is a variety in the road. It's fair to say, I mean, it's mainly darker red opposite. There is no particularly dark grey, but it's to a commercial building, and overall we consider it to be acceptable in terms of the street scene. We have put on that condition, seeking samples of materials to be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Roy, did you want to speak? You have 3 minutes.
Yes, please. Thank you. I would like the committee to consider that there hasn't been appropriate notice outside the property, and also that residents of South Park Road and Palmerston Road don't appear to be aware of the planning application. I would also like the committee to consider material considerations, which I'll talk through now. First of all, the design and visual impact. This proposal would change the way that the Broadway would look forever. I'd like at first for the committee to note the visual pictures provided by the developer of what the new building would look like doesn't in any way represent the neighbouring properties or indeed across the road what they look like in reality. The adjoining bright red terracotta terraces adjoining are greyed out, and across the road the theatre car park and church appear to have disappeared for more favourable pedestrian areas. This building turning from Victorian terracotta to grey is absolutely awful. For visuality, it has to be in keeping with the neighbouring properties. And as for the extra floor, it will look like a looming giant over anybody visiting the Broadway, and immediately in sight from anybody visiting the Grade 2 listed theatre just across the road. Noise and pollution. The noise from this building site, just 10 years after the original was built, let's not forget about that, will have an enormous impact of residents of South Park Road, the Broadway, Stanley Road and Palmerston Road, and for all those people visiting the new Wimbledon Theatre, the shops and eateries on the Broadway. There would be air pollution from the debris and the dust onto neighbouring balconies, the street below and adjoining residential properties. Ongoing noise after completion is also a major issue with the rooftop plant rooms and the rooftop open area. Privacy. Adjoining properties will be overlooked by the new 350 square metres of office space. Privacy is also an issue with the roof terrace on adjoining neighbouring blocks and houses, plus concern of the regular visits to the plant room on the roof. As members of this committee, you are representing the borough to ensure that the public interest is well served by this development. The impact on the public due to the material considerations I've already stated suggest that isn't the case for the owner to provide just an additional 350 square metres of office space. Does this part of Wimbledon really need extra office space? Does this part of Wimbledon really have to go through this amount of disruption less than 10 years from completion of the original, so that the owner can create a little bit more space and an outside area to the detriment of local residents? I'd argue no. For my final point, I'd like to say that the overall design of this building is terrible, and as councillors, I'd really like to push back and say to the owners, you need to do better, or just leave it as it is. We gave you the planning permission not too long ago. Thank you.
Do you want to comment on the consultation?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of the consultation, I did see your photographs earlier today regarding the site notice. So site notice just has to be displayed outside the premises, which it was. I know it's slightly to the left of the entrance to the building, but outside the premises is where it was displayed. It did look damaged, but unfortunately we can't control people damaging site notices, and nor are we required to re-put up a new one. And in terms of the neighbours, we consulted the residents that adjoin the site at the back of the property, at the back of the site, and they're who were required to notify. Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Lanning, I'll take you next.
Thank you, Chair. On page 26, Merton's Urban Design Officer says that a convincing argument needs to be made for the dark grey colour. It seems that the applicants provided further justification that essentially Wimbledon Town Centre has sort of a diverse array of buildings. So I just wanted to know whether the Urban Design Officer was reconsulted after that justification and had any further comments.
He wasn't consulted after that, no.
Christie.
Thank you, Chair. One of the responses to the consultation suggested that the development or the new development would give access from the office space to a residential area. It's not clear to me exactly where that would be, but could you clarify if that would be the case, and what, if it is the case, what conditions or how is that being addressed?
Thank you. Yes, we did see that in the representations, but we couldn't particularly work it out ourselves. I mean, the building, it is, as I'm aware, internally self-contained office space. In any event, that would be an internal management issue for the building operators, essentially. So, based on this application, though, there's no internal link to the residential flats, which are to the south side of this image.
Any other questions? Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if we could have another look at the building as it currently is, to contrast the redness of it. Yes, yes. I suppose that looks okay to me, and the grey dark staining doesn't look quite right, but what I'm not sure about is whether the change in colour is of itself a material consideration for rejection, or whether there are other factors we would need to take into account if we wanted to reject.
Thank you. Yeah, what we're putting up here is painting a building development. Would it need permission on its own? And it probably wouldn't. So, in that sense, I mean, it is part of the application, but I think on its own, we think probably they could do something to the brickwork in terms of paint staining without permission.
Any more questions? Councillor Hoskin.
Well, I have to say that, you know, it's just far warmer and more attractive, isn't it, in its present brick shades. I wanted to ask about the CGI imagery. The greenery shown along the terrace there, is that secured by condition, or is that just to make us feel better about it?
It is on the plans. It's technically not secured by condition at the moment. However, if members did want that tightened up, other than being on the floor plans, then we can add that as a condition to secure the landscaping and planting.
Any more questions? Councillor Makin.
On that image again, it looks like a fence around the top. That is visible, and it doesn't bode well with the rest of the environment around there. Could you explain why is that there?
That is the acoustic screen for the plant that's going to move to the roof of the building. So that is there to enclose the plant for the building.
I mean, you could put plant on the roof, but you don't have to surround it by, given it's an office building, you don't need to surround it by basically what looks like a security fence to me.
It is proposed, obviously, to safeguard the plant itself, but also for noise purposes as well. There are residential flats you can see here to the right-hand side, So that is part of the scheme to ensure that screening is there.
Councillor Lanning.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on Councillor Crow's point, should we believe that the application is out of keeping with the street scene and generally the character of the area, would that be a sufficient reason for refusal?
So that's a judgment. So visual amenity is a judgment with an application where extending or altering a building. So that is a judgment for members to make. But ultimately, we obviously consider that the extension is sympathetic at rooftop level. It still maintains that setback here. So as you see, that setback here, that remains. So comparing it to that image. So the main extension is at the top there, coming across, which would be here on this corner. I think it's worth noting that from our point of view, the proposal does do a lot of improvements in terms of the streetscape with this bit here at ground floor level, which most people would be walking past, and also enhances the general entrance to the office building. So given the town centre location with the variety of buildings in the surrounding area, we consider this to be visually acceptable to the locality.
I suppose the question is more in terms of sort of the colour palette, because it appears as though it's quite disjointed from the properties that it's adjacent to, so that the nice red brick, and of course we currently have red brick at 120, and this particular application is with the dark grey feels a bit oppressive. So I suppose my question around character and street scene was more around that colour palette as opposed to the actual sort of the bulk massing, etc.
If there's a general concern about the colour of the building, can we just get a show of hands of people who are concerned about the colour of the building? Right, so that's the issue we're dealing with here. That's something, it's painted, isn't it? It's painting over the red brick. Staining the red brick. So if they didn't stain the red brick, people probably wouldn't be bothered. Yeah.
Don't interrupt. I note in the modification sheet that there's a condition which the officers kindly included, that the materials are to be checked by, consulted with the chair and vice chair. Would it be better to take out chair and vice chair and say to be consulted with the planning committee? And that may resolve the issues of the colours.
Are we okay with this? You're nodding over there. It's not a major issue for you, is it?
I mean, the principle of development is the regeneration of the building, the upgrading of the workplace, and the colour of the brick is not the key factor in terms of the development at all. No.
Thank you. Right, then I think if we were able to see the palette of colours, we know that grey is not what we want to stay with the red brick. I'd need to know if we've got any other comments before I put it to the vote. Are there any other comments? Okay, on the basis then that the chair and vice chair will look at the palette of colours being used in this project before a decision, maybe before the colours are finalised. Would you be happy with that included in the recommendation? Yeah. So can I put it to the vote then? Those in favour of the recommendation with that additional? It's unanimous then. Okay, thank you. So it will remain red brick in our minds, won't it? Condition of landscaping. Are we incorporating the condition of landscaping?
That was generally agreed. That was
yes. Yeah. That is also included then. Thank you. It's the wrong one. We now do Southey Bowls Club, agenda item 9. Let's ask if David Cox is here. Oh, yeah, okay.
Chair, if I can firstly refer members to the late submission which has been circulated to members. You'll see that the application is for the erection of a new storage shed, and I think it's fair to say that officers acknowledge that a former storage building on the site has already been removed. That's the building that would have been where the hand's circulating on the screen. However, I would ask that this does not delay determination of the proposal, which is for, in the officer's judgment, a simple bowls equipment storage building designed to blend in with other buildings on the site. Members will be aware that there's been considerable planning history on the site, and you'll see from the officer's report this is set out. However, approval was given for the redevelopment of part of the site for a new Bowls Club building and also dwellings. Development is well advanced, as you can see from the from one of these photographs. We've got an image here of the changing rooms on the site, and the photographs taken with the officers back to the new Bowls Club building and clubhouse, which has been constructed, and to beyond and to the left of the image are the new houses that are under construction. The proposal is for an equipment store for the club and would be tucked away in the northern corner of the site. So the northern corner is over here, and this is pretty much the location where it would go. The slab on which it would be fixed would extend out beyond where the existing slab is. Between the club site and the houses in Abbott Avenue is a chain link fence, which you can just see in the picture. You can see the uprights to the chain link fence, and then a private pathway allowing pedestrian access to the backs of the houses in Abbott Avenue, and you can just see that there. And then the fences and gates of the houses. Some neighbouring houses have sheds, others have outbuildings placed at the end of their gardens. The store would have a gross external area of 14.3 square metres, a height towards the boundary with Abbott Avenue of 2.1 metres, and a maximum height of 2.9. Would you mind?
Please, will you wait until you have an opportunity to speak, please? Thank you very much. Just wait until your time. Thank you very much.
Its dimensions in the officer's judgment are comparable to a domestic garage. At its closest, the building would be around 15 metres from the rearmost part of the nearest houses in Abbott Avenue. Doors would face inwards towards the new changing room building. Extensive consultation was undertaken in the form of letters to 56 neighbouring addresses, generating a number of objections, including concerns about inaccuracies pertaining to the fact that the earlier store has been removed, visual impact, increased potential for burglary, and fly tipping. The officer has assessed the impact of what are considered to be fairly modest proposals, concluding that there are no reasonable grounds to withhold permission. Approval is recommended, subject to conditions.
Thank you. David Cox, you now have your opportunity to say your piece.
Firstly, I believe this is an application that is based off false and misleading plans. As you can see, it's confusing about exactly what is going where because the plans themselves are dishonest. They include a shed that's not there. We would not have been allowed to, or rather they would not have been allowed to proceed with this application without submitting an existing plan. The existing plan they submitted showed a shed that is not there and also a water tank, an old water tank that they've recently moved and significantly enlarged. In addition, it's not really a shed, it's effectively an extension to the existing massive changing room building. And I believe my understanding is very different to the planning officers. The high side faces me, Albert Avenue. The low side is going to be facing the bowling club. Now, if I'm wrong with that, then that potentially changes the degree of what I'm about to say, but I don't believe I am. But I think this demonstrates the confusion that exists around this application. Firstly, one of my first questions as well is I don't quite understand why the club has continually been dishonest about the fact there's an existing shed there. It's a fairly incontrovertible fact there isn't. The one thing I would say is that big water tank you see there, that's new. It's been put there in the last year. Was not put there with any planning permission. It's 10,000 litres, well above the size that is allowable for permitted development. So I wonder whether they're trying to disguise the fact that they've snuck this in without correct permissions, and I'd be keen to get the planning officer's view on that one. The wall that's going to be facing me and my neighbours is 3 metres high. It's going to be fencing us right in. We didn't complain about the changing rooms when they were built. They affect us, but they're a respectful distance away. Now it's going to be right up to the boundary, 3 metre high brick wall facing us. The club clearly recognises a 3 metre high wall facing you is not pleasant because it tapers down to 2.1 metres facing them. They don't want bowlers staring at a 3 metre high wall. Why should we? I'd also like this to be seen in the context of the overall development. We've had significant impact on our privacy from the two-storey bowling club that directly overlooks our gardens. The club illuminates it to 11:30 p.m. every night so that we can never forget it's there even when it's dark. That alleyway will now be completely obscured, so we've already had burglaries from that back alleyway. If we put a 3 metre high wall there, that will just get worse. Equally, I don't understand how they're going to clean it. It's going to be 29 centimetres from that fence. How are they going to keep it clean? I've been a neighbour of the bowling club for about 20 years now. Always thought of them as good neighbours until recently. I'm now getting quite emotional and quite upset having to talk about all this. And I really hope they just go back to being good neighbours the way they were for 18 years.
Right.
Michael McGrath. Just like to point out that there was a storage shed there, and the materials that were stored in it were moved into containers around the site during the construction of the shed. The intention is not to try and hoodwink or confuse anybody. We just wanted a storage shed within keeping of the development to essentially store our equipment. That's all we want, and that's all we are requesting. And we kept it in proportion to the size of the that we require. Nothing excessive, nothing sinister whatsoever. That's all I've got to say on it.
Can you comment on this 3 metres issue?
Chair, I visited the site and I've spoken to the site manager who's actually overseeing the work of the construction company. And I wanted to clarify the alignment of the building. And the site manager advised me that the lowest dimension, 2.1 metres, is on the side nearest to the chain link fence. The higher side, which is shown on the drawings with the doors face into the site so that the club members can access the building. So I don't think that the plans are misleading. If you look at the photograph showing the context, in order for a user of the building to access the store by the doors, the doors have got to be roughly where the hand is moving up and down here, and not on the other side of the building. That's the situation with the doors. Do you want me to comment on anything else that's been? I can do. The objector has raised concerns regarding floodlighting, and officers can note this evening and check the conditions on the original planning approval, and if necessary we can follow that up with the club if there's been any allegation of a breach of that condition. The point raised regarding tank, which you can see that the dark heavy-duty tank tucked away in the very corner of the site here, so that's the tank next to this outbuilding. I've asked the planning officer if they'd be so good as to advise me whether or not, having regard to the general permitted development order, as to whether or not that's permitted development or whether or not this is something that the council may wish to follow up with the club if they wish to retain it on the site. I don't think it's for me this evening to express a view one way or another on that. Suffice to say that planning officers will follow that up. And the final point regarding the structure being on the boundary, it's close to the chain link fence, which is separated from the gardens of properties in Howard Avenue by the pathway.
Right, questions? Councillor Makin.
What's the height of the chain link fence? Why wasn't the application put on the other side? If you go back to that one, that's it. On the other side where the parasol is, why wasn't it put there? That's another question. And how high was the original storage shed? Yeah, the one that was taken down, because that's...
Chair, when a planning application is submitted, it's for the planners to assess the merits of that application, and in this instance I would have been rather concerned if there'd been delay in assessing the application by suggestions to move the shed, which we've established, the storage building, to give it a more generic title, the storage building, which we've established is around 2.1 metres high. If there was any sound reason to suggest that that was moved to the area where the parasol is, which is also next to gardens of other residential properties. Yeah. In terms of the height of the fence, having gone on site, the fence is about head height for me, so about 1.8 metres. So the proposed store would be about 30 centimetres or a foot higher than the chain link fence, and I'm terribly sorry, I don't know the height of the shed that was removed.
Yeah, thank you. Can we? One of the problems with this is that the club appears to just not follow the planning rules, and we've had more than one further application, and there's already an enforcement action against them. So the residents don't have a great deal of trust in them. I think actually my questions were about the height of the original shed, which we don't know the answer to, and the height of the fence. This business about which is the high side of the shed, whether it's the side that backs onto the residence or it's the side that backs onto the club. So the resident view is that it's actually, the plan is that the high side is on the side of the garden. Can we just be absolutely sure that in whatever permission we give, if we do give permission, that we absolutely make it doubly 100% clear that the high side is on the side facing the club, not the side facing the residence?
Chair, if it would help clarify this, what I would suggest is an informative being attached to any decision saying, for the avoidance of doubt, this decision is issued on the understanding that. I think, to me, having spoken to the site foreman this afternoon, I'm satisfied.
I think it would be helpful because there is this level of distrust with the residents for frankly good reasons, and the water tank's yet another one of them, so I think it would be very helpful to do that.
Any other questions? Any comments? Move to the vote. Can I see those in favour, please? Subject to the, yeah. It's unanimous. Item 10, which is 6 Parkside Gardens. I'd just like to know who the people are at the back, because we could totally go to the Parkside. Are they? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Members, 6 Parkside Gardens is a site located on the east side of Parkside Gardens within the Wimbledon North Conservation Area. The site comprises a detached dwelling with large rear garden and front parking area. The site surroundings also comprise other residential properties which are largely detached dwellings. This existing site plan. The proposal itself is for the part demolition of the existing dwelling with retention of front facade and erection of extensions and excavation to form basement. The proposal also includes new front landscaping, car lift to basement and front boundary treatment. New windows will be installed and matching materials will be used for elevations and roof. Solar panels are also proposed on the flat roof section of the main roof, and rear roof terrace is proposed above the single-story rear extension. The basement will be accommodated under both the dwelling and partly the front garden and rear garden. This will comprise additional living space for the dwelling, storage and car for the dwelling in terms of storage and car parking. Turning to the plans, so this is the existing site plan at the moment. The existing dwelling on site, so you'll notice striking gable, front gable feature, dormer window and sort of barn hip roof, you could say, on the left-hand side there. Side elevations here and here. At the rear, another protruding gable coming out, a barn hip one here. Turning to the proposed site plan. So the proposal includes retaining the front facade of the building and demolishing and rebuilding extending at the back, including also a small side, 2-story side extension. Where the red line you can see here, that is the outline of the proposed single-story rear building line. 2-story rear building line is where the 2 gables at the back end here and here. You'll see the neighbouring properties either side. This neighbouring property, this is 2-story, but this bit here is single-story. This is all 2-story, and that conservatory here is single-story. At the front, proposed car lift, which would go down to the basement, would be here. This is the proposed basement plan. So the front of the property is on the left-hand side of the screen. This would be the car lift here, we'll go down, car parking here, and obviously further basement accommodation here. You can see the dotted red line, which is the building line above ground. So you can see the basement would go underneath, partly the rear garden. Really a closer up of the site plan, but also shows the ground floor plan. Some tree planting is proposed at the front. There's the car lift here. Ground floor accommodation. There's the light well at the back where the proposed basement rear access would be. Proposed first floor plan. And proposed top floor plan. Proposed roof plan. There's a small flat roof landscaping area here, which is not to be used for outdoor amenity space. Front dormer window remaining, 2 small side dormer windows and another side dormer window here replacing the existing one. Looking at proposed front elevation, you can just about see outline in red the outline of the existing building. So the height would remain the same. As mentioned earlier, replacement windows installed, a small 2-storey side extension on the left-hand side here proposed. Turning to the side elevations, so the streets here, that's that outdoor space talked about earlier, which is a landscaping feature. The first floor rear terrace is here, with proposed screening as well. Turning to the other side, replacement dormer window here, with a new one, and first and ground floor windows here. Turning to the rear elevation, 2 gables coming out, rear roof terrace here, single-storey extensions. This is also to be a sort of mock Tudor detailing like to match the front gable elevation. This is a street scene drawing. Some of the front boundary treatment is to be changed, including a new brick wall and gates. This is a plan just demonstrating the scale of the basement proposed under the rear garden and the front garden. So the front is taking up 48% and the rear is 19%. Turn to site pictures. This is a case officer standing in the rear garden at the moment of the property. He's standing in the rear garden looking left towards number 5, where there's single-storey extensions here. Looking the other way at the back to number 7. Looking at the front of the building. So the proposal includes retention of the front facade of the building. This follows extensive advice with our conservation officer on the status of the building. The front boundary walls would be replaced. The 2-storey side extension would come in here. And just looking further down the street scene. The case officer visited number 5 to view it from their perspective. So he's now standing in the rear garden of number 5. I could turn members' attention now to the modification sheet. You know, that additional basement plan showing the percentages take up. And also we have now received updated basement reports which have been looked at by a structural engineer where the proposal was amended, the basement was amended, stepping it further away off the boundary with number 5. So those have been updated to reflect the amended plans. Overall, Chair, the proposal has been subject to amendments following officer advice during determination of the application. The overall scale and design of the proposal is considered to result in a visually acceptable proposal without causing material harm to the neighbouring amenity. Officers therefore recommend permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Mark Fisher. I'm speaking for number 5 Parkside Gardens and additionally for Mr. and Mrs. Wall of 7 Parkside Gardens who are not able to be here this evening. I refer throughout to our written submissions to the committee of the 22nd of September and the engineering report by Elliot Wood, who have extensive basement experience in Wimbledon. In conclusion, the application fails to meet Merton's basement policy DM2 by harming built and natural environment and creating structural instability. It negatively affects neighbour amenity through overdevelopment of the plot, with extended depth, massing and the addition of a huge basement. We do not agree with the Council's structural engineer that, one, it can be built safely, because it fails to consider water diversion to numbers 5 and 7, and structural instability arising from lateral forces, or two, that it can be built at all because the proposed structure requires our permission to use our piles and prop the main buildings on our land, and we would not grant it. In addition, the Council's engineer refers to an outdated construction method statement and plans. These show the retaining wall in the wrong position because the basement wall has now been moved in from the boundary with number 5 by approximately 1.3 metres. In light of the above, we urge the Planning Committee to reject this application. Touching on engineering, the officer's report includes our engineering report from Elliott Wood and their 7 conclusions, but ignores all of them. No reasoning is given. Water diversion is of particular concern, and Elliott would maintain the current proposals would undermine the foundations of numbers 5 and 7. The applicant's assertion that the site is unlikely to have groundwater and will not add to the cumulative effect is contrary to all basement experience in Parkside Gardens, with underground streams giving rise to major engineering challenges. On amenity, we believe that the officer report focuses largely on the view from the road and ignores other key failings. There's an overdevelopment of the plot. The attached diagram shows the scale in comparison to 5 and 7 Parkside Gardens, including the car lift in the front garden, basement extending from the front garden to 6.43 metres beyond the new courtyard at the rear. The site plan shows the length at ground floor level extends beyond number 7 by 3.5 metres, and contrary to the statement in the report, 2 metres beyond 5 Parkside Gardens. The first floor terrace is contrary to Merton's planning policy. The proposed screen could be removed subsequently and will give rise to overlooking of number 7. And the bicycle shed blocks the passageway between 5 and 6 and undermines the purpose of having a 1.3 metre gap in the first place.
Thank you. Luke Chandrasinghe are going to share the 3 minutes they have. Is that okay? Who's going first?
Thank you, Chair. The application has been subject to lengthy and detailed discussions with officers over the past 20 months to ensure a policy compliance scheme has been submitted. During these discussions, the applicant has positively responded to comments from officers and also neighbours, seeking to work with everyone to achieve a high-quality new home. This has resulted in voluntary amendments being made to the application to satisfy these concerns. Some of these amendments include moving the southern and northern elevations away from the boundary, including the basement, reducing the size of the garage, reducing the size of the rear terrace and incorporating screening, retaining the facade features at the front of the dwelling, and obscuring windows to the south of elevation at first floor level to address neighbour concerns, even though these existing windows are clear glazed. We've also incorporated additional tree planting. We note the North Wimbledon Conservation Area is punctuated by numerous recent modern replacement dwellings and also substantial demolition behind retained facades. Examples include 17, 19, 20 and 42 Parkside Gardens. These clearly illustrate the changes which have already been, occurred within the conservation area, similar to that which is proposed this evening. The application therefore will be commensurate with existing dwellings, in keeping with its heritage setting, and will also respect the relationship with neighbouring properties and would comply with planning policy requirements. I'm just going to hand over to Luke. Thank you.
Thank you. Just reiterating what Karen said, we have been working with the council and listening carefully to their concerns over the last 20 months to reach a mutually agreeable design, reducing overall massing, reducing the scale, listening to neighbours and dealing with concerns about the basement. In particular, the basement, we have had professional team produce detailed BIA, flood risk assessments, wastewater management, groundwater management, and submitted all of these to the council. and supporting investigation reports, calculations and drawings to alleviate, hopefully, some of those concerns that were had by the neighbouring engineering reports. The current house, as we know, is in a poor condition and, in our opinion, does not contribute positively as it currently stands to the group setting. Our proposed scheme has been designed and detailed with great care and sensitivity, and we do feel that overall the proposal will make a welcoming contribution to Parkside Gardens. In addition, the new house will be built with high quality materials, integrate new technologies to reduce energy use, CO2 emissions overall, both during the construction process and when the house will be occupied. Thank you.
Any comments?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Regards to the basement, so the original proposal did propose the basement up to the boundary edge with the adjoining property number 5 to the east. Number 5 to the east does have an existing basement underneath that single-storey section here. However, this was amended and that is now stepped away from the boundary. Our structural engineer and flood risk officer has looked at this application in depth and conclude that they are happy with it in terms of flood risk, water movement and structural stability. We have also received the updated basement reports to reflect the positioning of the basement, to reflect what the proposed basement plan shows on the plans here this evening. And our structural engineer has, in the mod sheet, re-looked at it and is satisfied with it. It is a large basement. The proposal also includes a car lift down to the basement, which is somewhat unusual. However, it's a car lift where the lift does not go above ground, so it stays flush and the car would drop below ground level. The car would move on and then that would go back up flush with the floor above, rather than the other car lifts you can see, which are ones that go up. We've conditioned that as well, the details of that as a planning condition to be submitted to us. In terms of the building lines, proposal does extend back the two-storey building line. Amendments have been sought, which has staggered this particular elevation here further back. The ground floor building line does go beyond neighbouring building lines, and that is acknowledged. The screening for the balcony, that has to be retained, so they couldn't remove that. There would be a breach of the planning condition, which we're attaching to the permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Latif.
Thank you, Chair. Two quick questions. First question, the basement wall, the new basement wall, what's the distance between the basement wall, the outer edge of the basement wall, and number 5's foundations or their wall? And secondly, on page 131, where you've said that movement monitoring report produced by specialist surveyors, and the movement should be monitored from the start to the completion of the project works. Now, movements normally occur after it's been built, so can we change that to from the start to 12 months after completion of the project works? Because if anything's going to happen, it's going to happen after it's constructed. If we have very dry summers, if we have very wet winters, that's when it's going to have some problems. So, number one, what's the distance between number 5 and the new basement wall? And secondly, can we change the condition to have from the start of the project works to 12 months after completion of the project works?
Chair, in terms of the movement monitoring report, that would actually be covered under third-party wall matters. So the conditions that we've got here from the structural engineer, they are the standard conditions for basements when there's when looking at it from a structural perspective. So at the moment we believe we can't put 12 months after on it. in terms of a time frame. In terms of the distance from the basement to the basement wall with number 5, I'll have to get the plan out and measure that. So if you just bear with me, it looks to be about 1 metre, but if you just bear with me, I'll have a quick look at that. Yeah, measuring off the plan, that is just over 1 metre from where it's been brought back, where it was placed on the shared shared boundary line there. So just over 1 metre.
Right.
Just to follow up on this question about the condition, I didn't quite understand why, if we specified completion, we couldn't specify a year after completion. Can you just explain why we can't do that, please?
Sorry, Chair, yes, I mean, in terms of planning legislation, we shouldn't be duplicating other legislation. The Party Wall Act would be in place between the relevant owners to ensure that anything after the event is monitored beyond that particular time. In terms of planning, yes, we can do it for the actual development itself. And in fact, I'd argue it's probably not actually necessary in terms of a planning permission to have that. To be perfectly honest, I would say that would still be covered under the Party Wall Act. And again, legislation shouldn't be duplicated.
Any other questions?
How much bigger is the proposed new building than this is above the ground, so the bit that's above the ground, how much bigger is it than what's there at the moment?
So in terms of building height, it matches the same height. So outline red there is the outline of the existing building. There isn't the overlay, unfortunately, of the existing on the side elevations, but the gable extensions, they do go further back than existing. So, for example, looking at that side elevation, for example, that's the one that faces number 5. You've got the front gable and you've got the existing rear 2-storey gable. And then I'll go to the proposed elevation here. So it's coming out here. So the difference, not sure the difference is actually proposed in the report, but I can potentially get that from the plans, if that helps. The other side, this gable is shorter than that one, and then this is ground floor here. So in terms of the judgment, you can see this building line here. So that's the neighbouring properties conservatory. This is the 2-storey rear building line proposed there, and the ground floor building line proposed is here. So it's easy to look further out on the wider site plan. There's the 2-storey rear building line staggered, neighbours building line, but that is single-storey. The 2-storey building line to neighbours here, that is 2-storey here, and this is 2-storey, and that dark grey is a conservatory, single-storey. So that helps you an understanding of the building lines.
Okay, I mean that's helpful because I'm much more concerned about what happens above ground than underground. So it's helpful, thank you.
Councillor Southgate.
No, I'm on the underground bit here, and I share the Conservation Officer's concerns about the preservation of the facade during construction. So what safeguards are offered to suggest that that can be done, you know, basement excavated beneath it whilst it stays up? And that's the first question. The second question is, if those safeguards fail, what recompense do we have against the collapse of the facade, which has happened elsewhere?
So, as part of the structural engineer's recommended condition, the second bullet point requires further details and structural drawings of the facade retention system. Then that's to be submitted by the respective consultant/contractor. So that is still to be submitted, should permission be granted. In terms of if it fails and collapses, then the applicants technically would be in breach of their planning permission, and so that's the risk that they take, and then that would have to be rectified after. But that is essentially the risk that they take.
Can I just follow that up on what enforcement measures we might then take? Are we going to say, well, why don't you put in for a planning application to say that's fine, and you can have a new house like you wanted in the first place?
I mean, it's a house in a conservation area. Technically, if the building was to collapse in any particular way and they didn't support it correctly, then theoretically we could prosecute them for those works. They would be on an unauthorised development in a conservation area. So it's in their interest to support the front of the building.
Any other comments, questions? Sorry, Councillor Makin.
Thames Water presumably were consulted with one of the consultees, and they don't seem to have replied. Is that true, or I'm just missing that bit? Given that it's a basement and there is always problems about surface water on basements, I'm surprised they haven't responded.
Unfortunately, I'd have to check with the case officer. They're not listed in the consultees. We normally do go to them on major proposals. With the basements, we do go to our flood risk officer and structural engineer. But in terms of Thames Water itself, no, we haven't for this application.
Any other questions? Should we go to comments? Any comments? Councillor Southgate.
Just a concern about the feasibility of this and whether I don't think it's grounds for refusal, I'm afraid, but I do worry quite a lot, given the wish originally was for total demolition, that if the facade conveniently were to fall down, I'm not satisfied that we have adequate recompense. But I don't think we can require a bond or indemnity or anything like that. So just not happy.
I'm going to move to the recommendation. Can I see those in favour, please show? Seven. Those against? 2. The recommendation is carried. I recommend we have a 5-minute comfort break before we take the next item, please. There's tea and coffee in.
there. All right.
Okay. Right. Okay, we now move on to agenda item 11, which is 225 to 231 Streatham Road.
Chair, if I can just refer members to the modification sheet in this instance. There's some quite helpful text to clarify some of the points regarding the massing and height of the building in relation to the earlier scheme, the consented scheme, and also some comments regarding aspects and outlooks from the proposed units. You'll see also that there's some changes to the text for the heads of terms for the section 106. And if I can say at the meeting, just for clarity, it's important to ensure that the recommendation at the start of the report aligns with the recommendation at the end of the report. There's some text missing regarding early and late stage reviews at the outset of the report, which isn't rolled forward into the recommendation part. You'll also see there's an additional condition which is proposed, which seeks to ensure that some of the details about landscaping and surface treatment are mocked up in the event that the permission is granted. This site lies on the north side of the railway line on Streatham Road, travelling north towards the northern edge of the borough. The proposals comprise a revised scheme following identification of a significant water utility, a water main, which provides a constraint to construction, and you'll see the feedback that we've had from Thames Water on this running across the site. If I can just take you to the plans, you'll see a landscaped area has now been kept free from development, and this is where the Thames water main runs. So part of the development is cantilevered over the space, but generally speaking, this space has now been kept free from development. This has required the applicant to rethink the model for development on the site, and I understand, having spoken with the case officer, that the owner of the site is the same as that that we were dealing with for the earlier scheme, but they've appointed architects to review how to deliver a meaningful development on the site. The scheme comprised 15 square metres of retail floor space in the pale blue area on the image, with 28 flats above. And if I can ask members to have a look at section 3 of the report, and in particular paragraph 317 of the officer's report, here the officer sets out the key differences between the approved scheme and the proposed scheme. There are some more units, the mix of the units is a little different. The massing of the proposals is different, but that's why I also drew your attention to the points in the modification sheet that the building which is being proposed is fractionally lower than the building which has been approved, but this has arisen because the approved scheme, if I can just this is the image of the approved scheme, and you'll see towards this corner the roof slopes up and there was this sort of pointed area. And if you look at this again, you'll see gradually the roof rise, also the parapet rising up to that corner. Now, the difference with this scheme is that we now have a building which, although that corner is absolutely, it's within about 30 centimetres difference from the approved scheme, you can see the massing is different. So we've got a more, I suppose, chunky form of development here. You'll see various concerns have been raised, including the mix of the units, the need for 3 and 4 bedroom social housing, questions as to whether or not there's a need for more retail floor space, and impacts arising from servicing and parking. If I can take members through the officer's report, in principle, members have endorsed proposals for a building rising to a height comparable to that which is now being proposed, but clearly not of a similar mass to what's now before you. In terms of the housing mix on the site, members were content at the time of considering the last application that the scheme should be approved with only 1 3-bedroomed unit. Now, that's now been dropped from the scheme, so we have 1 and 2 bedroomed units. The officers, however, are confident with their assertion in the report regarding the character of housing locally. I have asked the case officer to check against our Land and Property Gazetteer what addresses come up on properties in at least 7 stretches of local road around the site, and for what appear to be individual plots in streets, the Land and Property Gazetteer reveals an individual address. Had they been converted to flats, one might have expected 1A, 1B, 1C and so forth. And whilst there are a number of individual entries, officers are content that we're not overstating it when we say the area is predominantly family housing, and that in that respect the proposals would help diversify the mix of accommodation in the area. In terms of affordable housing, the proposals would deliver an improved offer over and above that of the earlier scheme. But as you will see from the way in which the officer's recommendation has been worded, it would be subject to further reviews if the development were not to proceed. Visual impact of the proposals has been considered in some detail, concluding with paragraph 7.519. Again, officers would not shy away from the fact that the proposals would have a significant visual impact on the area. The buildings are currently low rise and are quite unattractive and run down and do little for the area. But it's very much a matter of judgment as to whether or not that impact is something that members feel comfortable with. If we go to the floor plans, you'll see that we have the bungalows street which runs east-west beyond the site, and you'll see that the building starts at ground floor, rises to first floor, second, and then is set away quite considerably from the boundary, both here and here. So again, there is that degree of separation, that sense of space being created. Again, officers have to determine whether or not they feel comfortable with that massing that has been suggested. Officers are comfortable in this instance that what's been proposed is acceptable and wouldn't harm neighbour amenity. Issues of privacy have been addressed. Noise, again, the officer comments that whilst it's fully acknowledged that a major development such as this would have an impact or could have an impact on the amenities of neighbours. There's no reason for us not to attach suitable conditions on construction management plan, construction logistics, hours of construction, all designed to safeguard, so far as is reasonably practicable, the amenities of neighbours. The standard of accommodation has been assessed. The proposals would fulfil or would meet the national housing standards. They'd also provide adequate amenity space in accordance with local and London plan requirements. I'd also draw your attention to the modification sheet where commentary has been made regarding the quality of the space with notes regarding the dual aspect units that make up the scheme. In terms of transport matters, since the last scheme was assessed, a controlled parking zone has been introduced locally, and whereas before the applicant was looking at identifying certain bays here as perhaps ones that could be for use for deliveries. We've now got bays which are identified as controlled parking zone resident bays only, and this scheme, if approved, would restrict the occupiers from parking permits, other than in the instance where the applicant was disabled. So although this scheme doesn't actually include parking on site for disabled persons, the presence of the bays and the way in which the council would normally structure and word a legal agreement would enable a person, if they lived in a flat and were disabled, to apply for the use of one of those bays. To further incentivise persons living in this development from using cars, so there's always that concern that perhaps outside of the controlled parking zone hours people might still try and park locally. You'll see that the applicant has agreed to engage in providing 3 years car club membership, which again can help promote more sustainable forms of travel. Servicing, well, that can be outside of parking control times. On sustainability, you'll see that officers have quantified and sought, and there's an in-principle agreement from the applicant to provide carbon offset contribution, and you'll see finally on issues of biodiversity that the proposals are not considered to have a harmful impact on the corridor which runs along the railway line. The recommendation is to grant permission subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement and conditions. Thank you.
Steve Boone.
Good evening. Yeah, I'm a resident of the bungalows, which is the street that is on your diagram there above the development. As the name might imply, the houses there are mostly bungalows, and so although I don't actually have an objection to development, in fact I think it's a good idea, I think the height is completely disproportionate to all surrounding buildings. Quite recently, another development has gone up on the other side of the railway lines. That is quite similar, but it's they've been able to restrict that to 3-storey, and I don't see why on our side, where the buildings are much lower, we have to take 6. I have to take your word for it that parking's looked into. We do, that being retail, we do wonder about the end of the road being blocked with delivery lorries, refuse lorries, and the like. No, the height is my main objection, and I don't know if anyone would like to come back to me on that.
Thank you. Can you switch your mic off?
Yes.
Thank you. Can I call on Mr. Wyke Chung, please?
Hi. Yep. Okay. Good evening, members and chair of the Planning Committee. My name is Wyke Chung, and I'm the planning consultant from Turnberry, acting on behalf of the applicant, Stepping Stone Limited. I trust members will acknowledge that the principle of residential mixed-use development here is not contested, given the benefit of a similar proposal that was approved back in March 2017. The applicant is unable to implement this permission, as it would build over the Thames water pipeline that runs along the southern boundary of the site. Due to easement rules, we are unable to deliver the approved scheme. Therefore, we had to re-engage with planning officers and sought to improve design proposals, which we bring before you today. As outlined under paragraph 3.17 of the committee report, officers have helpfully outlined the main changes between the approved scheme versus the revised scheme. I would like to take this opportunity to highlight the following. A development on brownfield land would regenerate this underutilised and vacant part of Streatham Road that currently suffers from fly tipping. The new development would reactivate the Streatham Road frontage, bringing further vitality to the area. At 28 residential units, we are delivering 3 more residential units, i.e. 12% increase when compared to the approved scheme of 25 units, thereby further meeting housing need in the borough. Affordable housing contribution to the borough via a commuted sum to increase substantially from 335k to 741k, thereby more than double what was achieved in the approved scheme. Whilst we are no longer providing a 3-bed unit when compared to the approved scheme, paragraph 7.3.8 of the committee report highlights that the area is dominated by family housing, and so our predominantly studios 1-2 beds proposal will help diversify local housing stock, particularly for first-time buyers and the younger generation of the small family. The retail unit on the ground floor would promote economic development in the area and provide employment opportunities to local people. Maximum height of the approved scheme is 19.7 metres. Whilst we are now 1 storey higher, the maximum height of this revised scheme is actually lower at 19.6 metres through amended roof design. The step design of the building, with its higher mass moving away from number 2, the bungalows, means its impact on amenity is minimal. Building footprint of the revised scheme is recognised as significantly smaller than the approved scheme. At paragraph 7.6.8 of the committee report, we know officers have confirmed that the impact of the development to number 2, the bungalows, is no more harmful to that already approved. Windows have been sensitively placed to avoid any harm on adjacent amenity areas. Our development will be car-free and will have in place appropriate restrictions on parking permits to the new residents of the development, thereby minimising parking stress in the surrounding local area. Car club membership will also be provided. Finally, through the pre-act process with officers, we consider our scheme to be well designed. It would maintain its car-free and mixed-use status, whilst delivering more housing that will respect its surroundings. Thank you for listening.
Chair, I'm anticipating a discussion regarding the height of the building, and I think in this instance I would simply draw attention to the fact that this was the scheme which already has approval. So you can see from that where the hand's moving, that's the road known as the bungalows, and you can see there this is a fairly substantial building with an undercroft and then the floors above. And that was endorsed by members.
So I don't know why this is not going off. I'm going to go on. Okay, I think it's dealt with. Can you turn yours off?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Questions, please. Councillor Makin.
Could you go back to the overhead with the ground floor on, presumably? That one, that's it. The commercial unit, where's the traffic going to go to get into it, and what sort of commercial unit are we agreeing to, or have we already agreed this?
Chair, the application is for a proposal which would allow a retail unit to be formed on the ground floor of the building. At this stage, the applicant has not said that they have a potential tenant lined up. The size of the unit is comparable to the convenience stores which a number of the major food retailers run. You normally get them between around 250 to 320 square metres, so it's of a size that could be attractive to such an end user. But in terms of traffic, if it was a local store, then you might reasonably expect people living locally to be able to walk to the store to get a loaf of bread, a pint of milk,
yes,
a ready meal.
That may be the case, but any convenience store needs servicing and it needs deliveries of products to sell to the local people. Therefore, something has to be. So, where's the big Tesco's van, for example, going to park when they come to deliver all their stuff?
It won't be a Tesco. We've already got one then down there. I don't think it's going to be another one.
The parking restrictions on the neighbouring highway aren't so restrictive as to prevent early morning and later in the evening deliveries to this site quite legitimately without breaching any planning controls. So it's feasible.
Councillor Henry?
Just question on the park and the speed limit. I noticed on page 143.5203, it's saying 30 miles per hour. So I wonder why it's different, because we're in the 20 miles per hour now.
Didn't quite follow the question.
No, yeah. So I don't think the speed of the traffic's got. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. On page 140, clause 3.16, I note that the applicants said he approached several registered providers, none of which have taken up the offer of the housing. Two questions. First of all, how many housing providers did the applicant approach? And secondly, has he stopped approaching them now, or is he going to carry on continuing approaching housing providers?
Chair, if I can ask members to turn to page 152 of the officer's report, you'll see there the list of housing associations that they approached. Now, the way in which the legal agreement is proposed to be structured would still incentivise the applicant to continue to try and draw in a registered provider once development commences. Now, that's proved to be quite a tricky issue with the developer, because I'm sure the developer would be quite happy to have the off-site contribution and move on. But officers have asked that this matter be retained on any legal agreement. And if we look at the way in which the London Plan policies are worded, It says that local authorities should look at trying to maximise the delivery of affordable housing with or without grant. The council has over the years collected significant contributions for affordable housing and has, in one or two instances, the Barrett's development at Western Road in Mitcham and the Bewley Homes development on Grand Drive, the council has used the money that it's collected to help steer and influence the delivery of affordable housing in those developments. In the case of Western Road, it helped deliver more affordable units than previously was proposed. And officers would wish, in the first instance, and it could be a case of some very careful wording to a legal agreement, but officers would wish in the first instance to have at least tested with the applicant the potential for delivering more affordable units with grant, and it would have to be then a case of a separate branch of the council determining whether or not using some of our own collected affordable housing money could be directed towards this, would it be giving good value, to see whether or not it could deliver extra affordable housing units, and if it could, that may eventually draw in an affordable housing provider, because it seems that we have had some issues with affordable housing providers where small numbers of units are proposed and there's been a reluctance to engage. So there's some quite tricky discussions to be had on this, but officers are focused on trying to drive up the potential to deliver, which in turn could incentivise an operator.
Yes, Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Chair. This is a kind of follow-up question on this original scheme offering on page 140, section 3.16. It says, the scheme originally offered 4 affordable rented units and 2 shared ownership flats. Then, when we go to the supplementary, page 7, it says the provision of 8 shared ownership, which sounds like a step up, but then it goes, or 2 times social rent, 1 time shared ownership, which sounds like a step down. I'm just finding that all a bit confusing, given that the money seems to have increased quite significantly. And I just wonder if you could explain how the shift in mix of shared ownership and social rent has come about between the original and the current proposal.
Chair, the mix of units which is set out in the supplementary agenda is the correct mix. The officer has acknowledged that there was an error in drafting the paragraph in the report. So the mix which is shown on the modification sheet is the correct mix. In terms of the increase in the cash in lieu payment, there are numerous factors that go into a developer carrying out a viability appraisal. Those factors will be sensitive to changes in interest rates, changes in construction costs, changes in demolition costs, site remediation. There are, like I said, a number of factors that come into play, and it would be naive to say that at all times the same outcome will be delivered from the same scheme. That's why we have the review mechanisms included in any section 106, so that if, for example, a developer didn't press ahead with a scheme for, say, 2 years from the date of planning permission, and there was a buoyant housing market, and interest rates were lower, and there was a surplus of builders and construction workers available, it's possible that the scheme could be slightly more profitable, in which case the council might say, well, you know, we'd like a larger contribution. But I think that's the starting point. These inputs will change over time, and that's why figures can, a couple of years on, come out different.
Any other questions? Comments?
I do remember the scheme we approved previously, and obviously that's material consideration here. And looking at it again now, I'm just, we thought that's so great.
It needed hoarding round it. The site is in a desperate state, really filthy. We've had travellers on there that have dumped. It has been a massive, massive eyesore. And I feel very sad, really, that the owner hasn't taken steps, really, to improve that demolition site for the benefit of residents who've had to live next to it. So I hope now that you've got planning permission for this, that you will move swiftly with it, because I think those residents deserve to have something decent next door to where they live. Can we move to agenda item 5, which is 18 Belvedere Grove?
Thank you, Chair. Remember, 18 Belvedere Grove is a detached two-storey dwelling located on the east side of Belvedere Grove, here outlined in red. The site's in a residential area. A plan of the existing house, existing hipped end, single ridge roof structure. The proposal itself is for extensions and alterations to the so the existing small. That's the roof plan. So looking at the in ground level 3 floors. So you've got a existing rather large box dormer window at the back, and a sort of 2-storey section coming out here with a flat roof and roof terrace. You can just see that there on the side and the box side of the dormer window. This is the proposed site plan. So the proposal extends the roof out, and also erects a protruding gable end, and also single-storey side and wraparound extension. So garden, ground floor, outlines the footprint of an extension being constructed at the moment on the neighbouring process to bring the gable back here, which actually forms in line with the neighbouring 2-storey extension under construction. The top floor plan here, and roof plan. Elevations from the front largely remains the same. There's some small alterations to the porch and a new roof over the garage. Section plan, so you can see the basement there at the bottom. Looking at the back we go, and a 2-storey brick gable coming out with single-storey rear wraparound here, and then you've got the lower ground floor being created here. Turning to the side elevations, so it's proposed side, and the other side, from single ridge to crown flat top. View led new roof over top wood. Adjoining property is same period, obviously, as the host building itself. Proposal itself is for a 2-storey side extension, including basement, single-storey rear extension, and a detached garage. That's just an outline of some basement construction details put forward. This is the existing ground floor plan, existing first floor plan. So they're removing a rather unsightly extension on the left-hand side. This is the proposed ground floor plan. So extensions coming to the side here, step down to the basement, and light wells here. First floor, so you've got a bay window being put here. This is the main part of the extension. There's the detached garage proposed. And that is the basement plan. So the basement proposes for further accommodation with light wells here. Roof plan, so tiles and brickwork would match the host building. It's been specifically designed to be set back and down to be a subordinate extension to the building. Looking at site plan, so you'll see the building, the extension is less than half the width, less than the full width of the existing property. The proposed garage to the front, there is a large boundary wall at the front here. Turning to elevations, so from the front, essentially what you see from the common would be this proposed extension existing above. So as I said earlier, step down, step back, what we sort of seek for in 2-storey side extensions. Looking from within the garden, so that's what we're faced within the garden itself. They're putting on a bay window similar to the existing at the back. At the rear, an extension here, and then shows the side extension there. And the garage itself, with traditional design, roof tiles, but of a fairly low height to a single ridge. And then they are street scene, existing and proposed with the neighbouring property. Some site pictures. That's at the rear. Existing neighbours adjoining. I've got that extension there. This neighbour at the back. So the garden's sort of largely overgrown in places. Some neighbouring properties are overlooking the garden. Extension would go here, you see. So this would be removed. These trees here removed. Neighbouring properties. So that's the garden there. From the front, adjoining neighbour here, and there's the extension coming here, and there's the boundary wall. So overall, Chair, also recommend permission be granted, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, we have no speakers for this item. Do we have any questions? Yes, Councillor Macon.
How many trees are to be removed on this plan? And are they going to be reinstated?
In terms of tree removal, there's two trees removed, which are a Japanese maple and a moderate quality apple tree, as described by our tree officer. There's a third tree to be removed, which is just outside the site at the frontage there. They've done a arboricultural report. We've looked at it, and with the tree officer, and we're happy with the loss of those trees in terms of the visual amenity of the area. There are still there's a large mature tree here, for example, would remain. But overall, we're happy with those. No, they're not TPO trees, but we do actually have a landscaping and planting scheme recommended by the case officer here. So within that, we could seek some additional tree planting.
Can I suggest a condition that we ask for all trees removed to be replaced? So as if they remove 3, then 3 to go somewhere else.
We've got the condition where we can request that. We can't actually insist on that. They're not TPO trees.
That's what
we can certainly request it.
Right, condition to request it.
Are there any other questions? No. Councillor Southgate.
The boundary wall here is, from memory, pretty high, isn't it? Insofar as I can't remember much about the property because you don't notice it as you're walking along. And a new boundary treatment is proposed. Can we just check that's going to be no higher than the present?
Keep installing the gate, a new gate, and new pedestrian access gate here. The wall, as far as I'm part of the, or replaced as part of the scheme.
Any comments? Can I just gauge whether everybody's in agreement with the request for trees to be replaced? Is that general agreement? Because we can't insist, but okay. So can I get a check, those in favour of the recommendation, please, including that condition? Thank you. Those against? Not voting. Then the recommendation is carried. Agenda item 14.
Yes, Chair, we're simply seeking to retain tree number 7 on the side Nash, and for that to be confirmed. It's a good quality tree. As it happens, the applicant doesn't object, is quite happy with the TPO. It's a neighbour that wants the tree not to be protected, but officers are confident it should be. Thank you.